this week's program, we're going to be highlighting some of the regional finalists for the Young Farmer of the Year, and as you'll be aware, we're doing it warts and all. It's as it happened. We haven't tightened it up or given them a second chance whatsoever. Also going to be telling the story about the live sheep shipment going to Mexico. It's about 50,000 hoggets disappearing over there for breeding purposes, not slaughter, but for breeding purposes. And we're also going to be talking about horticulture as well as several other things on the land. But in just a moment, we're going to be talking to Roddy McKinnon. Roddy, it's an interesting thought that people can put two people in one grave at different times.
Yeah, that's fairly common in New Zealand. We have what we call a double interment. So it makes sense. You have one piece of ground and you dig the grave a little bit deeper, one on top of the other. That's really common. In fact, some of the cemeteries in New Zealand you can go over what we call triple depth. So you could have essentially three vertical bunks, if you will.
Because you don't have to go 18 feet down.
You do have to go, well, not quite 18 feet, but it's jolly close to it. It's a long way down.
Really?
A lot of the cemeteries in Canterbury, the water table was too close to the surface, so that's not possible, or the soil is not suitable for it. There's a variety of reasons, but one trend that is emerging, a big problem for cemeteries right throughout the world, is that as people shift towards cremation, you've got all these cemeteries that have an infrastructure attached to them. And as you know, in Canterbury, we've got a council that is running on fairly lean times in terms of their income. And one of the things that they're looking
That's
to
a very nice way of putting it, Roddy McKinnon.
Yeah, they're tight, yeah, shall we say, yes. And the issue that they've got is that they have to keep increasing the cost of the plot, and their interment fees are it seems almost on a 6-monthly basis. It's not quite that bad, but it's close to it, to keep pace to the fact that they've got dropping incomes because they don't have multiple interments. So as we go towards cremation as a nation, and we are, we're probably about 70% now, and I think we'll be 80% by the end of the decade. Only what was plenty of consistent income, what was a grave for life, as it were, as a concept is really fundamentally flawed. So New South Wales in Australia, across the ditch, has introduced legislation that you now buy a lease on a grave, and it's for a set period of time.
A lease? A
lease, and at the end of that time, if you don't renew your lease, you will be disinterred, and the remains cremated and given to you in ashes. Now, for a lot of people, that would have some religious and ethical and just downright yuck issues associated with it. It's not uncommon around the world. In Sri Lanka, you buy a family plot, and every time there's a family death, the last interment, or the one previous, is disinterred, placed into one side, the bones are clean, placed into a little box. The new person goes into the grave, and all the bones are placed back on top of them. And so one of our staff members who lived there for about 12 years, he said he's seen up to 25 boxes stacked up on the one side of this family plot. And it's the same concept. Ground is precious, don't have a lot of income. If you sell a grave for life, or in New Zealand's case, it's in perpetuity, who is going to pay for it in 100 years' time to maintain it? Who's going to mow the lawns when you've only been paid years ago a small amount? And because, like most councils, they don't think that far ahead. They've got no...
Most of them don't think past the next
election.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think it's just something we're going to see in New Zealand, that it may not happen in the next sort of 5 or 6 years, I think, but it is something that's been looked at by some councils, that burial now has a time limit on it. There's a shelf life, as it were. And so that's something as we as a nation we have to look at. And it's interesting, we seem to have a lot of dirt, but we've got no one willing to pay for it, as you can imagine.
It's interesting you're saying 70 and growing towards 80% cremations. Is that a fashion thing, or is it because of graves?
I think there's two drivers. I think as we become more secular as a society, there's less pressure to be buried, because traditionally Christian, we're predominantly a Christian nation, or we were, now we're not. So we've got all of the people who have immigrated from other parts of the world who bring their own funerary traditions with them, and a lot of those are cremation. We've been historically Anglo-Saxon Protestant, as it were, and that's now shifting. So there's no pressure to be buried. The fact of the matter is the rising cost of the grave is a significant margin above a cremation funeral. So people are going, well, hang on, I can do a
it's
funeral.
economic.
Yeah, it's economic. You know, you could do a cremation funeral for around about $8,000, but to do the same, exactly the same thing, but be buried might cost you $9,500, and so $1,500. It buys a really good wake at the pub.
Well, it's also a lot of cases, it's just people get stretched, they can't afford
Oh,
that.
absolutely. And I think everything comes into consideration. And if you don't have an imperative to be buried, essentially, if you look at it on a logical point of view, cremation just hastens the process by about 40 years. Because at the end of the day, what's in a grave is, there's very little left, even bones. Most people think the graveyards are full of bones. They're not. They dissolve within about 30, 40 years. The natural minerals in the soil and the water moving through the soil dissolve them, and there's nothing there. You can dig up some of these graves that are 100-year-old, and all you'll keep going, you'll just work your way through the soil, and you'll never find anything. You might find a few screws from the casket, maybe the odd metal handle, but that's all there'll be. And so once people think that process through, they suddenly realise that cremation is no real difference. It's just a shorter time frame.
Yeah, and yet, funnily enough, you know, we watch television and see that Richard III's bones were found under a car park.
Exactly. Look, there's always going to be...
Sorry.
Thanks for contradicting me, Rob. Good one.
No, just sort of, because that's the concept. That's
it is the concept. It is, but I think any farmer will point out to you that if you leave a stock in the gully and don't retrieve a dead animal, you come back in a year's time, there's nothing there. The same thing applies. If the soil conditions are correct, as in no microbial action, it's in clay,
right,
and it's dry, yes, the bones will survive. But in New Zealand, that's not the case. We're a young geological nation, and so there's a lot of activity going on. However, there are down where I'm from in Timaru, some of those country cemeteries down there, that's pure clay. There's 6 inches of topsoil, and then it's pure clay. And those there, I guarantee you, there would be remains if you would just go looking.
You know, I wasn't trying to contradict you. I just wanted to sort of say
people's
concept is...
Let me know how you get on.
Thanks very much indeed. Now, I want to talk to you briefly about money, because you said, you know, sort of around about 8,000. There is a rule of thumb in there somewhere?
Yeah, rule of thumb is you give me as much money as I possibly can get out of you. No. Look,
we won't quote you on it.
Most funerals these days, if they're what we consider a full service funeral, as in they have newspaper notices, they have flowers, they have a casket that's not a cardboard box, they have a service of some description, and they have some form of catering, either before or after or during. Those sort of funerals are going to be in the $8,000 to $9,000 range.
Yep.
If they are burial, they'll go higher than that, but the two determining factors on whether a funeral goes beyond that will be if they have gone from just a standard cup of tea to something special for food, or if they have picked a very expensive casket. For the most part, you could throw a blanket over most funeral costs. There are much cheaper options available, but they are automatically cremation. Because to give you an example now, if you said to me, Roddy, I want to buy a plot in the Christchurch City Cemetery tomorrow, I'll send you a bill for $2,600, and I won't have clipped the ticket. That's exactly what the council will have charged me to provide that service, and you can purchase that yourself. So when you think about that as a proportion of funeral costs, that $2,500 is going straight to a council, doesn't leave a whole bunch for all the other things, the casket, the flowers, the newspaper notices. You can spend $1,000 on newspaper notices by putting one in the press, one in the Auckland Herald, and then one on the day.
Very briefly, if you don't do a service, there's no real closure.
I think at the end of the day, if you look at someone's life, whether it be 60, 70, 80, 90 years, and they just disappear with no acknowledgement, the people left behind will not be in as good a shape as if they'd taken the time to actually remember the person. And I'm not saying you need to spend money on it, but actually acknowledging the life in some way, shape or form is hugely important to us as a society. We don't treat people like we're just getting rid of them. We do want to honour their memory, we do want to say, and like I say, you don't need a funeral director to do that, but you should do something.
Roddy, thank you very much indeed. In just a moment, we're going to be talking wine and food when we travel out to Lincoln University. What does this department do?
Well, this department's name is Wine, Food and Molecular Biosciences, and it does everything that it says in its name. It's a bit like sort of a tin of paint or a tin of Ronseal. It does what the name says. We are a centre in terms of developing expertise in wine science, anything from the growing of the grapes, the manipulation of the plant material, looking at fermentation technology, how to make a good bottle of wine, looking at the aroma and flavour compounds of different wine regions and different wine grapes and different wine fermentation processes in order to reach the consumer in optimum quality. We dabble in food innovation, food processing, food and nutrition, and again that's with the consumer in mind. So we need to provide the New Zealand consumer and the consumer that buys our food in terms of export market, we need to provide that consumer with good quality food that helps them in terms of their nutrition and also is traceable back into the individual industry places and marketing places that food comes from. And then we have molecular biosciences. And molecular biosciences is really the key to both of those, because without understanding the biochemistry, without understanding the molecular structures that we deal with in terms of wine and food, then we don't understand how we can manipulate those to really serve the consumer best.
So where do you start with all that?
Very good question. You can either start with science, and then you go into very theoretical, researchy type of ideas. You can start with the consumer, and then you are really looking at the applied nature of food and wine and food technology in general. Or you can start with the students and think about education, because really education and learning experiences and facilitating that learning experience is key to university, as well as sort of the research and other aspects.
Lincoln University seems to use a lot of their PhD students.
We do, and I have recently been appointed as director of the graduate school for Lincoln University, and it's one of our main thrusts in terms of allowing our PhD students and our master's students the opportunity to work with industry to undertake that research, because we believe that they are the leaders of the future. And if we can capture their imagination, we capture their ideas, it will help New Zealand's economy in the future.
Charles, how do you get all that out to the industry?
Incredibly difficult. We have to talk to them. And sometimes talking to industry from an academic point of view is very, very hard, because academics and professors like myself, we come across as a little bit staid, a bit of grey around the edges and sort of been in the business a little bit too long and removed from the chalk face. So it's really having a focus on the applied nature of what we teach, what we research, and what the industry needs is where we start from. And that applied nature is crucial to Lincoln University. We've been in food since 1873 in one form or the other. And it's that long heritage of helping not only the farmer in Canterbury and the farmer in the South Island, but the food industry in New Zealand and globally. Many of our researchers, for instance, are travelling professors, going to conferences and disseminating knowledge widely across the international sector, and also bringing back international expertise to New Zealand so that we can magpie ideas for the benefit of New Zealand. And our PhD students and our postgraduate students are a rich source of those sort of magpie ideas that we can use.
There's a lot more to food than just putting it on the plate. We'll be back with more straight after the break.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce?
I can't think of everything.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active Amino Acid Biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
Matt, what do you do for a living?
For a crust, I milk cows. One of the many down in Canterbury. I moved from the Waikato down here for the opportunity, or the vast opportunities that are in Canterbury. So I'm currently contract milking 700 cows in Rangitata. But on Gypsy Day, which is in a couple of weeks now, moving to an equity manager's role just over the other side of the river, I guess you would say in Hines, and that's 1,100 cows, but still milking cows.
What's your ultimate ambition? To own a property?
Absolutely, that's been my burning goal since I was about 3 years old. I've always wanted to be a farmer. That's all I've ever wanted to be. And when I went to uni, I was doing something else on advice from a careers advisor, which wasn't bad advice. It was just I was looking at the money, and they sort of said to me, "Don't waste your talent. Don't be a farmer," kind of thing. Agriculture has that poor perception, which I'd love to change if possible. And then switched in my first semester of university to doing an agriculture degree, and I absolutely love what I do. It's not a job, and I quite happily do it for free, so I figure I found the right thing to do.
And obviously you're dairying, so is it very hard to learn about sheep and beef and cropping and horticulture for the contest?
Not at all, because I was actually brought up, well, my parents are currently sheep and beef farming, my extended family sheep and beef farm. I've got a couple of guys who do horticulture, so I've sort of been brought up almost, I won't say perfectly for the contest, but do have a lot of advantages, like I can shear sheep, I've done pruning, all of those kind of things. So from that side of things, the way I've been brought up has actually worked out perfectly for the contest, because there isn't an area I don't entirely know. I guess fishing's probably pretty poor, but yeah.
So obviously you've got a lot out of young farmers.
Yeah, an untold amount of my career is put down to the Young Farmer Contest. Through when I apply for jobs, people have recognised me from the grand final previously, or I currently now bank with the ANZ, and that was through the ANZ Young Farmer Contest. One of the guys who interviewed me said, "Oh, you're keen to go shear milking?" He came out to my place, spun me a bit of a yarn, sold me on the story, and yeah, so I now bank with the ANZ because of the contest. My current accountant, the guy I deal with at the bank, all of these things are because of the contest, and it's such a great profile. Everyone, or people who you want to know in agriculture, know what the contest is about, what's involved, so those are the sort of people I want to associate with as well. So it's been phenomenal, and it's a heap of fun too. You get to drive cool diggers and stuff.
There must be people though, Matt, who would go, "I don't think I could do it because it's scary."
Yeah, you're not wrong there. A lot of people do think it's scary, and it's all in your head. You're not going to die. Someone told me that once, like in front of a crowd or whatever. You're not going to die if you do it. Hopefully not anyway. Like it's just taking that initial step out into the public spotlight, I guess. Even at the district final, guys are worried, "Oh, what does he think?" Who cares what people think, really? So it's not scary, it's a lot of fun.
What's the silver bullet that's needed to fix the dairy industry at the moment?
That's a great question. I don't believe there's much wrong. There are small things around, but a lot of it's market driven at the moment in terms of what's going on. So I think it's 1 year. $4.50 isn't the worst payout there's ever been. So I think a little bit of caution, just we'll ride this period out, and it'll actually, I think, could be potentially good for a lot of farmers to realise that $8.40 is not a sustainable price. There will be fluctuations, but I don't believe, it's that bad, to be honest.
Jim, we've got resistance in a lot of things like internal parasites, but now you're getting a bit concerned in your neck of the woods.
Well, the Weed and Pest Society, Rob, which is a voluntary organisation in amongst the chemical industry as such, and they're doing an extremely good job. And one of the recently I was one of many who attended a workshop in Auckland regarding the potential and also known resistance to some chemical compounds. Now these compounds cost an extremely incredible amount of money, about $250,000 to get to a commercial point, and then we go and misuse them in the paddock. It sort of defeats the whole attitude, the whole point of having pesticides. So one of the things that we've realised is the real concern is that education for the grower or farmer himself to know, is he really mixing and using the same type of compound over several times during the season?
This is sort of like reading the instructions on the back and not... Yeah.
Well, it's quite interesting. There was quite a discussion on the instructions on the back and what's on labels and what isn't. Now, it makes sense to us on some of the things that MPI wish for us to put on those labels. It will not make sense to Joe Farmer, and I'm not being derogatory to the farmer or grower. It's just terminology that they don't understand. And the biggest problem we've got there is that we've got to get the people who deliver and sell the materials to understand the implications of what they're actually doing. And that's the concern for the industry. And we've already got known materials such as the strobilurin group, materials which are being used quite extensively in apples, but have been multi-used during a season, now already got resistance. Now these are only a few years old, and that's a really glaring example. So now we're saying, well, okay, what have we got in the pipeline, and how do we manage those materials sequentially without creating resistance? So there's several parts to that. One, we've got to get what's written on the labels in law.
Yep, and able to be understood.
But more importantly, understood. And that's a major part. The other part is that we need to be able to warn people that if they mix other materials, they'll prevent resistance, but is that right for the crop they're going to be putting it on? So there's a number of issues there. But one of the things that we've found to be probably the best pathway forward is for the different group of different sectors, the different fruit growing groups, so pip fruit, grapes, vegetables, all these different sectors, they need to actually look and say, hey, these are the materials we're generally using on our crops, so we need to make sure in our sector spray approved schedules that these are not going to create resistance in the future. So it's an ongoing thing, and everybody in the industry, no matter what level they are at, are all responsible to make sure it comes right.
This comes back once again to accountability and that sort of thing as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely it does, yeah. I mean, there's nothing worse than to have a nice new material come on the market and everybody starts to use it, and within, say, 2 to 3 years, and that's as quick as they can be, we start to get resistance to it. What's next in the pot? Now, we could go back, and we do go back to old chemistry at times, but we really need to get more of these user-friendly, much more environmentally sustainable materials. And it was interesting to see that the Green Party was at that workshop, and they
as you'd expect.
As you'd expect, but actually it opened their minds, and they realised that yes, the industry was trying to be extremely responsible in this area. So it was rather good to see.
Goody. Interesting wine season coming up.
Very well. We've just had an interesting wine season. We've had a lesser amount of grapes actually processed into wine. Quality is always good, and once again has been proven to be the case in 2015 vintage. 2014, there's quite a bit of 2014 wine still out there, but because there's about 100,000 tonnes less this year produced in 2015, there's going to be some increases in price. Now, the CEO, Philip Gregan from New Zealand Wine, said the other day, that's a good thing, and I totally agree with Philip on this, in that in overseas markets where they are really still screaming for our Sauvignon Blancs and our Pinot Gris and our Pinot Noirs and what have you, that's where the value is going to go up, and that's good for the grower and for the processors and label owners. In New Zealand, if you go along to your local supermarket, there is a proliferation of actually very good wines in most cases, but they're in behind labels that we don't really know, and most of those are actually from the big companies, the Pinot Ricards and the Constellations, and they're second and third labels, but they're not second and third tier quality. Mm-hmm. So you can still get a nice $10 bottle of wine in New Zealand, or $20 up to $20 bottle of wine, and it can be a very good wine.
There's nothing wrong with loss leaders if you're the buyer.
Absolutely. But the interesting thing is we need to get value back into the business for all parts of the business. So it's really interesting to see that our export sales will actually generate some more value as the quantity becomes a little tighter, which is actually very good, very positive for the industry. I'm very pleased to see it for the grape guys, because they're coming out of a trough that I dare say the dairy guys are going into at the moment, or are feeling at the moment. The grape boys had that 3 or 4 years ago, and they're now getting out of it, getting on top of that wave again, which is really good to see.
Brilliant. Now, I don't want to talk about horrible things, but G7 this morning.
Yeah, it used to be 8.
Yeah, it used to be 8. They're now saying they're going to extend the embargoes.
Oh, really?
Into Russia, and the Russians are saying, well, couldn't give a damn.
Yep.
that affects us.
Absolutely it does, more so than people really realise, and that it goes across the board for all fruit and vegetables and any foods really. Yes, Mr Putin doesn't seem to be too worried about his own people starving or missing out on nutritional food. It means that the world keeps producing the tonnages around the various producing countries, and we get gluts and we get financial disasters. So, I mean, the dairy thing could be a long haul, and so could lower vegetables and soft fruits and apples. Apples at the moment are going really well, but it can change just in 5 minutes, so it's not good news to hear, Rob.
And Jim, basically it's because where we would traditionally send our stuff is now not needing it because it's not going into, nothing's going into Russia.
Nothing's going into Russia, and there's a huge amount of food goes into Russia from Europe, from the western part of Europe, and of course we still feed into that market. So we are getting better. I mean, I think that the current government have done a tremendous job of expanding our reach into the Asian countries, China, and even into America, and now of course they're looking at South America. So we need to have a very broad base to buffer some of the implications of what's going on in Europe.
Yes, it is a bit scary, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's real, and it's going to have a lot of effect on our GDP in New Zealand, without a doubt.
So local market, very small compared to overseas.
Well, you know,
we can't eat what we produce.
People say to me, well, it's pretty good to have a country with only 4.5 million people, and I think we need 10 million. We need 10 million working people, and we'll have a much better economy, and we'll be able to have more mouths in New Zealand to consume some more fruit and vegetables that we do produce, but that's going to take time.
Well, John Key's not going to be in that role forever. Do you want to have a go?
No, that's not my thing.
No, tell you what, it's not mine either.
I'd like to help the growers grow it better, but that's about where I'd be at.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. And in just a moment we'll be talking about taking water off, which seems a bit silly, but we'll be talking about droughts. But yeah, we're going to be talking to RX Plastics about taking water off in areas that needs it. Tony, RX Plastics are known for putting water onto properties, but also you take it off.
Yes, drain away product is designed for the draining of wetlands to improve the soil and increase production on farms.
So what's the principle?
It's pipe with holes in it. As much as we try to make most of our pipe without holes in it, pipe with holes in it to generally laid to laser to a fall, about 8 inches below the surface, to take that surplus water and get it away as quickly as possible, providing good growing conditions for the plants.
Now, soil types, so what sort of soil types do you use it for? The clay type ones?
Generally it's the peaty type soils that been reclaimed swamp basically, so very, very, very popular in Southland and some
West
of the
coast of the South Island?
yeah, to a degree, although there they tend to have a bit of a base, so hump and hollowing's quite common, but
what's hump and hollowing?
They change the contour of the ground to have it flow into channels and flow out. The west coast is a bit interesting because, of course, it is a little bit more rain and moisture than we can handle in a relatively small pipe.
So I guess this is sort of the modern version of a field tile.
Absolutely, yep. Yeah, modern, dare I say, cheaper.
Yes, you are. You can dare to say that.
And it's a little bit more robust. You get quite a bit of movement in field tiles, which create a little bit of misalignment. So a lot more care has to be in the laying. So laid field tiles is a very expensive operation.
And Tony, it comes in pretty long lengths.
Yeah. Often they have trenching machines that are operating on a laser from a given point, and just roll it out. Each coil comes with a joiner, so they can join them up and design their system as required.
After the break, we're going to be talking to yet another one of those regional finalists at this year's Young Farmer of the Year.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking,
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking. Think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce?
I can't think of everything.
Think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world. Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
Tell me about what you do for a living.
I am a sheep and beef farmer. I work on my parents' property northeast of Hunneville.
How big's the property?
We've got a spread out operation. We've got about 1,600 acres.
Over quite an area if it's spread out.
Over 4 different properties. Yeah, it's not all in one place, so a lot of driving between.
So what are you running?
Predominantly Romney ewes and a higher proportion of beef cows. We got Simmental based beef cows, and there's about 250 of them calving each year.
Why Romneys?
That's a good question.
Just because it suits that sort of
Romneys are a fairly versatile ewe. They're the base of most ewes around the place. They pump out a relatively good lamb. They're a good all-rounder.
Been a lot of work done on fertility and sort of basically getting them right as far as mothering is concerned.
Yeah, the Romney ewes are a pretty good mother, and fertility has been increasing over the last few years. We're up to in the mid 140s now, so it's going well.
And that's at docking?
That's at docking, yes. It's a docking percentage.
So why young farmers?
I moved to Southland and I didn't know anyone, and young farmers were pretty much the first people that called in, picked me up and took me to the pub.
And now you entered the contest and you're a finalist, so you obviously the contest is pretty good fun.
Yeah, I've done the contest as long as I could. It's my 7th year of doing it. If you're going to be involved in young farmers, why don't you take advantage of everything it offers?
And it must be hard to learn all the different aspects because you're sheep and beef, but you've got to learn dairying and cropping and horticulture.
There are a lot of aspects to the contest, and it's good. It teaches you to think, to look at a situation and adapt, really. I mean, the contest is there to see you succeed, and it's always set up for you to have a go. And even when you don't know, you can still achieve things.
So what's the silver bullet that's needed to fix the dairy industry now?
I wouldn't know anything about that. I'm a sheep and beef farmer.
1986, I think it was, when I was based in Timaru, and we had live sheep exports heading from that port. Now, those sheep were going to go for slaughter, and there was a lot of controversy. There was a standoff in the port, and in fact, it was really, really horrific. All these years later, there's going to be another 50,000 odd of them leaving from the port of Timaru, and a whole lot of cattle, but this time it's not for slaughter. It's for breeding. We'll have the details for you in just a moment. There's a lot of sheep heading offshore.
Yes, 45,000 lambs that are coming to Mexico with us. We're planning to load these next week and hopefully be in Mexico around the 25th of June.
Your record for shifting sheep, Javier, is actually very good.
Yes, indeed. We had a shipment 70 years ago of similar quantity, 35,000 join ewes, and for that shipment we had a loss of 0.1 of 1%, very minimal, and that is a reflection of good health and good preparation of livestock.
I don't think many farmers could actually boast that sort of level.
Indeed. I think most livestock exporters wouldn't be able to boast that level of very, very low losses. And again, a combination of good preparation, good feed, good health, and good work between the two governments involved.
So it must be some very serious protocols from both countries.
Yes, to get this done, we have to comply with the Mexico-New Zealand agreed protocol. It's a protocol agreed between the two governments, and this implies not only certifications of New Zealand's health status, but also it implies blood testing of the ewes to make sure that they're free of certain diseases. So yes, a lot of work is done behind the scenes to make sure that we comply.
And animal welfare is paramount?
Animal welfare is paramount, and it's paramount for both countries, not only for New Zealand but also for Mexico. Government of Mexico as well as the government of New Zealand are very keen that these animals are treated in the best possible way. And from our point of view, from our company's point of view, we know that treating animals well is good business. So we're all on the same page in terms of animal welfare.
Tell me about the feed.
Well, in every case, feed is produced to standards, so we have to comply with regulations on what the feed has to have as in terms of minimum protein, minimum energy. All of that is calculated so that the animals have enough nutrition for the voyage, but also enough fibre. Very important that the feed, the pellets that we use, have sufficient fibre in them so that the rumen of the animals continues to work efficiently during the voyage.
And they're weaned onto that before they get on board?
Yes, well, we're standing here at the export preparation property. The animals come in here and are received on baleage. And then slowly introduced to pellets, so that by the time they get on the ship, they're on a 100% pellet ration and they're very used to it.
So what's going to happen when they get to their new destination?
When they get to Mexico, Northern Hemisphere, it's summer in Mexico. It's going to be a little bit warmer than today here.
That wouldn't be a bad thing.
And we discharge the ship. That takes about 3 days for us to do. And they all come to our property. We have 120 hectares of land prepared to receive these animals. They're fed on pellets, so we share the pellet formula between the feedlot here in New Zealand, the ship, and the feedlot in Mexico. They all work, even though they're manufactured in different countries, the feed has the same specifications. So we make sure that there's no digestive disruption. We then pregnancy test individually every animal. The whole 47,000 will be pregnancy tested. In this case, because the pregnancy testing season in New Zealand is on, we couldn't get a New Zealand person to come and test them, so we're going to have a Scottish man to come to Mexico and pregnancy test his ewes. And only pregnant ewes are delivered to the producers that are going to be getting these animals.
What sort of numbers?
So these producers will get between 30 and 50 sheep each, depending on how many they've been able to purchase. In Mexico, the total price of the animal is divided in three parts. The federal government provides part of the funding, the state government, where the sheep are going to, provides part of the funding, and then the producer puts in about a third. So between 30 and 50 sheep per producer. We'll be talking about 1,000 producers benefiting from this program.
So they're going to be used for breeding, hence the fact that they are pregnant?
Indeed. We used to take ewes for joining in Mexico, but we found that with the change of hemisphere, not all the ewes were able to join straight away. So by taking pregnant ewes, they lamb, and they seem to be able to get into lamb again very quickly.
So really, they've got a normal future life breeding.
Absolutely. They'll join local flocks. Lamb production is the name of the game. Generally in Mexico, lambs are sold at 42 kilos live weight into the meat trade. So these ewes will have a normal life, change of hemisphere, change of climate perhaps, but in terms of their purpose, yes, they'll have a full breeding life ahead of them.
There'd be those who would say that it'd be pretty hard to find 50,000 sheep in New Zealand at the moment.
Well, it's a big exercise, without a doubt. It's a big exercise, but the company that supplied us with the sheep here in New Zealand have done an amazing job again, because they did that 7 years ago for us. And I think this is an exercise that's not being done anywhere else in the world. It's a complex exercise. It's taken us 2 years to get to where we are today, and it's taking us 6 months here in New Zealand since we bought the first lambs. So there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes to make this a successful exercise.
The interesting thing is that everything possible is done to make sure the sheep are the best quality and very happy in animal welfare.
Indeed, and even though today is a bit wet, cold and miserable, we've been blessed with very good weather in the preparation period, so all of the sheep have taken to the feed very well, they're eating very well, and we predict a very successful voyage.
And the Ministry of Primary Industries have been very helpful?
Indeed. We had a very good meeting we have 6 Mexican veterinarians in Mexico at the moment checking the sheep. On behalf of the government, we had a very useful meeting yesterday with the Ministry of Primary Industries. And as I said at the beginning of the interview, I think our objectives are aligned. We all want a successful shipment. We want this to continue. We want to be able to come back next year and do this again.
And after the break, we're going to be talking with the last of our finalists for the National Young Farmer of the Year.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce?
I can't think of everything.
Think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
So Dwayne, what are you doing for a living?
So yeah, I work on Lochinvar Station on the Napier Taupo Road, a relatively large scale sheep and beef farm, just under 10,000 effective hectares, and yeah, my role is a stock manager there.
That's a big role.
Very big role, yep, plenty of stock running around there. We've got sort of just under 30,000 ewes and 1,800 breeding cows and progeny, so yeah, fairly busy job.
So what sort of rolling land is it? Is it steep or is it flat? Or?
Contour on Lochinvar is pretty good. We've sort of got about 4,000 hectares of flat to rolling, and then the balance sort of medium hill, so nothing too steep.
And you've obviously got a lot of faith in the sheep industry.
Yeah, still plugging away at the old sheep industry. It's got to have its day in the sun one day, so we're keeping on with the old lambs for now.
And what sort of breed are you using?
Sticking with the good old Romney ewes up at Lochinvar, so tried and tested in New Zealand for many years, so we've got our faith in them.
A lot of work being done by the Romney breeders on fertility and mothering and things.
Yeah, a lot of work on sort of fertility. Sort of our lambing percent's right up there, sort of sitting around 140, 145%, so pretty impressive stuff from the Romney group, yeah.
And that's it tailing or drop?
That's docking percent, tailing, yeah.
Tailing, yeah, we call it docking up there.
Oh, sorry, this is the North Island type thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll be very proud of that.
Yeah, no, it's a good effort. Wasn't too many years ago there, they were under 100%, so we sort of had some big shifts in the last few years with our performance there.
And you're keeping them purebred?
Yeah, yep, definitely keeping them purebred, sort of staying away from the composite type breeds, just climate and environment up there sort of suits a more traditional breed.
And Dwayne, why Young Farmers Club contest?
Just, well, initially for the social side of things, and then got a bit of passion for the contest and just the networking through the contest, and yeah, sort of benchmarking myself against other people and hopefully be able to scratch my name on the title in July.
And you've got a home advantage.
Yeah, a bit of a home advantage being in Taupo this year, so no pressure, as 1,000 people have said to me before, but we'll see how we go anyway.
Dwayne, serious question, what has to happen to the dairy industry to bring it right again now?
I guess, yeah, that's sort of a tough one. They're sort of fairly heavy commodity based with milk powder. Probably, I don't know how much New Zealand can do about it, like it's sort of heavily influenced by China and their demand, so it might be a case of waiting and seeing what happens and farmers watching what they spend in the meantime.
Just ride it out a wee bit.
Just ride it out a wee bit, I think. Yeah, there's not too much the old Joe Bloggs farmer can do at the moment.
And it is cyclical, just like sheep and beef have been.
Yeah, we're seeing downturns in sheep and wool, so we know how they feel and we're enjoying the good ride at the moment. So.
Nick, it's time to think about abortions in stock and how to minimise the risk.
Yeah, so that's the time of year we're at. It comes around very quickly. So abortions, I guess the big question, whether you're no matter what sort of size enterprise you've got, is well, when does this problem turn into something that I need to be looking at? You know, we always expect that we're going to get the odd hiccup and the odd loss of an unborn. But when does it actually start, when should I be starting to investigate and try and minimise this problem? Is it going to turn into an epidemic, or is it just a sporadic problem? And that's a very difficult question to answer as a veterinarian, but the typical numbers that we sort of throw around are, if your losses are between sort of 1% and 2%, then it definitely becomes economically viable to start looking at investigations. But on top of that, you have this scenario where you're losing a group of pregnancies in a very confined location over a very short period of time. So if you've got a mob and you've got quite high abortion rates in that mob over just a number of days to a week, well then that's a pretty good indication that we might have something contagious that's got the risk of going through a larger number of animals. So that's when you should be on the phone and getting the vet involved.
So what do? You wrap them up in plastic and put them in the deep freeze or something?
Well, freezing them is actually not such a great idea, but yeah, certainly we need certain tissues that we need to investigate that. So the first thing to do is definitively identify the dam if we can, because sometimes we need to take blood samples and things from the dam as well. As far as the fetus goes, a fresh fetus would be good, and the afterbirth if we can, and just kept in a cool environment rather than frozen, and obviously lifted from the paddock. Even if it's predated or scavenged a little bit, we can sometimes get the tissues we need. The important bits of tissue are placenta, and in particular the cotyledon, which is the little, it looks like the little bumps all over the sheep afterbirth. They're what we need. Fresh stomach contents are very good, so as intact an animal as we can, sometimes liver as well is what we need to be looked at. So yeah, these are the tissues that we need. Freezing them, of course, if we're looking at infectious causes, it can damage the organism that we're trying to find, and so just keeping it cool and avoiding major temperature fluctuations is important. Yeah.
So when you're doing this, of course, you should actually be very mindful of your own health.
Absolutely. The Brandenburg, the Salmonella Brandenburg problem has died down a little bit, although we still do, every year we're still getting little snippets of outbreak around the district, and that can be still in sheep farms, but also in cattle getting diarrhea in calves. and I think there's the odd case of Salmonella Brandenburg pneumonia even. So the organism is still around, and that's a real nasty bacteria, and humans are definitely susceptible. So when you're dealing with these situations, be mindful that not only could this be infectious to other pregnant animals, but also to yourself. So your own health and safety is important. When you're handling these tissues, try and make sure that you've got gloves on. Wash your hands thoroughly when you've been dealing with pregnant livestock. And removing the products of abortion and either burying them or burning them after we've got the tissues we need to avoid such organisms that are going to cause this problem getting spread far and wide. So making sure that that those products of abortion, the afterbirth, the dead fetuses, are either buried or burnt. Good bird control is great, because Salmonella Brandenburg, for instance, there was heavy implication that a lot of the cause of spread of that bacteria was through scavenging gulls and things, feeding on the afterbirth and actually shedding the bacteria from one property to the next.
Is there any tie-up with toxo and feral cats? Because that was...
Yeah, there is a bit of a linkage, but maybe it's not as strong as you think. So toxoplasma is a parasite that it causes, as you rightly say, causes abortion. That causes abortion typically in two-tooth or younger stock classes. The reason that happens is that once the animal's been exposed, immunity is lifelong, and so that's what's less likely to be seen in older animals. The definitive host of the parasite is the cat, and so the little organism reproduces sexually in the cat's intestine, and then spores are shed through cat feces around rural areas, and then inadvertently through grazing. Sheep, for instance, can be exposed to the parasite, and that's when it can infect the placenta and cause abortion. And I should mention also that toxoplasma is a known cause of abortion in people as well, and so it's very important that we're mindful of that situation. When it comes to toxoplasma being spread to people, it's not only worrying about getting exposure through contaminated soil where cats have been toileting, but we get cysts in sheep and cows and other mammalian species, so actually simply handling raw meat could also be a source of infection to people. So again, especially when we got human pregnancies involved, ensuring good hygiene practices and actually simply getting the doctor to actually take a blood sample and see if you're already immune is going to go a long way. So
very good idea. Are there vaccines that you can use for the animals?
Absolutely. So pretty much all of the well-known bacterial causes of abortion, so we're talking Salmonella, we're talking Campylobacter, and the Toxoplasma, the little parasite we just talked about. There's vaccines available for all of them. I'm not saying that it's going to be economically viable to vaccinate every flock, or every flock in the country, and that's why it's important to get a diagnosis and understand what's happening in your district and what sort of risk profile you've got. Discuss this with your veterinarian, and then preempting protection where it's appropriate with vaccination is a very good thing to do. Toxoplasma vaccine, for instance, it's a one vaccine, induces a lifelong immunity. But as in a number of vaccines, it's important which stage of the year is used. So you need to plan this and be in contact with both your local community and your veterinarian to understand what risk profiles you've got. For instance, if 3 out of 5 of your neighbours have had a Salmonella abortion storm the previous lambing season, then it would be a pretty good warning sign that you want to discuss this with your vet and maybe particularly start looking at inducing immunity in your flock to that particular organism.
So basically it's a case of talk to your veterinarian and plan.
Talk to your veterinarian, plan, and open your ears and eyes, and it's a good indication for good commonsensical social interaction with neighbours in a district as well.
Brilliant, no, thank you very much indeed, because it is a pretty expensive thing to have going through a flock, because obviously, or a herd, for the obvious reasons.
Oh yeah, you can lose a lot of income before they've even hit the ground.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you have just missed On the Land, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.